Hello there and good evening. So just wanted to try something different and jump on a live. The idea being that we would take a look at maybe a video, martial arts video, instructional video by someone very, well known at the time, Joseph Simonet, who has now obviously passed on, sadly, but someone who is extremely influential and has been extremely influential on my thought processes when it came to how I processed my Kenpo training, how I looked at other systems like Filipino martial arts, jiu-jitsu, and so on as well. And it's just interesting to look back and just see kind of how he thought about things and how he looked at things back then, and really how a lot of it kind of ties in with what I do and what I've tried to do over the past few years with how I train and how I introduce different systems into it as well. So hopefully you'll enjoy it, and wanted to take you along on the ride for this one. Again, just something different that I wanted to try, and just see how it worked out. So hopefully you'll get something out of it, and if you do, please feel free to share in the comments, or let me know if there's any other videos that you'd like to see me review or take a look at and kind of add some scope to as well.
I'm going to borrow two training ideas, concepts, and or drills from the Filipino arts to help enhance our Kenpo karate. In my opinion, Kenpo, with its multiple weapons seeking multiple targets, its rapid fire flow, explosive motion, is exceptional martial art. As I said earlier, it's my foundational art. But I went outside of Kenpo to help enhance it in situations where the technique of a Kenpo karate motion has gone south. What I mean is I start doing kimono grab, they step back, they move away. The dictionary of motion, the story problem, and or the reference point is no longer kimono grab. I needed something in my martial arts training, particularly in the Kenpo, that could help me effectively deal with the change of scenery, situation, and or attack. So the ability to adapt and flow away from the dictionary of motion or the Kenpo technique, I felt was vital. Going to the Philippines.
And this is where, like, one of the things that comes up, very much, as you can tell, like, Joseph Simonet was a Kenpo black belt. I believe he was ninth degree. He was actually a Tracy Kenpo black belt. So the Tracys being former students of Ed Parker himself, who then became peers and had their own system. They kind of went off and did their own thing from there. Some of the variations that they came up with was, instead of, where we have 156 techniques in the Parker system, and we have progression techniques. So, to pull out an example, we have charging ram, you would have broken ram, and you would have intercepting the ram. Those would be three separate techniques spread across the different systems, as we know, or across the different syllabus, as we know. But ultimately, what they would have done at that point in the Tracy system was they would have had a variation 1, variation A, B, or C. I'm not fully aware of how that used to work, but essentially this is what I've managed to kind of learn about it. So likewise, as you can see here, when the system fell apart or didn't quite stand on its own, where answers weren't really available for certain things, this is where Simonet would have looked to other systems. So again, he had like I believe, Pencak Silat background. He would have also done Filipino martial arts, as he's mentioned as well, and a whole host of other things, including his own variations on martial arts that he did by blending his styles together. So in similar ways, it's kind of like Jeet Kune Do, which is, use everything that's useful, take everything you can, and he always ran it through the filter of Kenpo, as you heard him say as well, or his version of Kenpo that he was studying at the time. Very much in line with my mindset. Obviously I've spent the majority of my career in Kenpo as my main martial art. That's where I have my 6th degree in, and then I've done Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, I've done Silat, I've done Filipino martial arts. I've pulled up all these different things, not to a high level like in any of those cases. I'm an instructor in Kenpo, obviously, but in these other systems I've gained a level of proficiency, let's call it, and then certainly I've run them through the mill of what I already do. So this is one of the things that I really kind of gravitate towards Joe Simonet, and his approach back then was very much take what you can from everybody, feed it through the system that you already know well, plug the gaps or expand the capabilities of the system that you're already doing. So again, very kindred spirits, I think, in that terms as well. But it's just interesting to look back on this video, which would have formed a lot of my opinions when I first saw Joe Simonet and was introduced to him by other friends, who were training as well. Essentially, it's an interesting one to look at because, again, my opinions were formed back then. I was looking at someone who was a high-ranking Kenpo practitioner at that point, and already seeing, yeah, okay, it's all right to look outside the system. It's a great system. It's got a lot of complex maneuvers. It's got a lot of details and layers in terms of the material, but it doesn't answer every question. And this is one of the things that comes up, as we'll see in a few moments. So again, this is kind of why I'm interested in this, and looking back on this, it still gels with my current approach to martial arts, or my thought process around the martial arts that I do, which is why often you see a lot of my Eskrima stuff coming out. I'm being added into my Kenpo, or trying to tie it to the Kenpo principles and where it fits well as well.
Filipino arts, they do a sensitivity drill called hubad. Hubad simply means to tie and untie. What it is, it gives us the ability to listen to our opponent's intent by making contact with them. Some call it sensitivity drills or energy drills. Really, it's feeling the pressure, that's the energy or the sensitivity, where they're moving. So in hubad, it's going to teach us to listen to our opponent. We can adapt off of our Kenpo techniques when the technique has gone south. The other additional training...
There's quite a few people who've actually done this, and like hubad again is just one of those drills. There's plenty of them. You've got hubad. You'll also hear hubad lubad, as it's known. You'll hear things like palakao, payong sombradas, all of these different things from Filipino martial arts as well. And essentially they are what you see here as what has been demoed. Flow drills to give you shapes, give you situations to train specific shapes, and then generate options and opportunities from that shape as well. Now, oftentimes it's a lot of things where if you've already done an empty hand system, something like Wing Chun, for example, would have, free flow. They would have, well, not free flow, sorry, they would have chi sao to be more accurate. That would be their flow drill, but that's more constant contact. That's to do with chasing the center line, sticky hands, as you'll hear it referred to as well. But a lot of systems have this, and Kenpo is not without its drills. It's just that oftentimes they don't kind of use it as a shape generator. But there are other people out there who've done this. You have Zach Whitson, for example, who is was under Kakoi Kenyete, who was a Doce Pares Grandmaster as well. And like that, Doce Pares Eskrima, another version of that, but they would have done things like hubad and so on. And Mr. Whitson brought out a few years back what was known as Counterpoint Kenpo, which was, again, a blend of, from what I'd seen of the materials, Filipino martial arts flow drills into Kenpo techniques and so on. So similar idea here, giving you a shape generator, giving you something that you can plug in what you already know in terms of your strikes, the ranges that we work at within Kenpo, and expand upon that a little bit more.
What we like to do is what I call joint lock flow. It's a way to remember techniques, a way to remember joint locks. We put them in an order, A, B, C, D, as almost like a two-person kata. So instead of striking all the time, or most of the time with Kenpo when we're inside, we can use hubad to listen to our opponent's intent and help manipulate where we want them. And then right in conjunction with that, off of hubad, we have the joint locks. So we will show you hubad in its basic mode from many different angles. We'll do some techniques off of hubad. We'll show you some locks off of hubad. We'll also show you a lock flow, and we'll integrate the two, and then we'll put them together in some Kenpo techniques for you.
So again, there you kind of see the concept of the shape generator. Hubad can be used to unlock or add in all manner of different things, be it lock flows from jiu-jitsu systems or other systems that have lock flows in them. Again, strike patterns, techniques, whatever it may be. It's setting up options. And again, it generates in Kenpo terms points of origin. Where you will then be able to recognize certain shapes, certain energy that's being projected upon you by the person that you're training with, things you can capitalize on, things that might force you to change the way you think, and react to those different points of origins and those different kind of stimulus that you get as well. So there's a lot in it. It's really useful as well, which is good. In terms of the lock flow stuff, again, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, which is one of the systems that I've studied with my best friend at the time. We were both training together. He was a black belt in it. We did a lot with lock flows. What we often found was lock flows, again, are great for generating shapes. However, understanding why you move from one lock to another is a good one, and that's where even later on in life, I looked at, or later on in training, I looked at things like Rory Miller, where he had more practical approaches to joint locking. So again, breaking it down by lock type or joint type. Your hinge joint being your elbow and your knee, your gliding joints being your wrist, your neck, your ankle, all of these different things, finger locks, shoulders, being your ball and socket joints, much like your hip as well. And knowing that the simplified principles that come from that and how each of those things works or doesn't work, makes it more applicable to locks. It's easier, I've found, to pull out locks rather than actually work them in a lock flow once you recognize the shape or once you recognize a position, or where something is failing indeed. Then you can actually start kind of pulling your locks out a bit more fluidly. So I find the lock flow is a great idea just to give you an idea of shape and everything else like that. But one of the things that I did as we went further along in our training was we looked at, okay, there's only so many ways a joint can turn, or there's only so many ways a joint can function. Once you understand that concept and principle, the possibilities are as endless as your imagination or the situation determines for you as well. So just some interesting things there as well. But again, Hubud would be one of those things where you would recognize these shapes or opportunities to capitalize on a lock and so on. And yes, I am enjoying some red wine while I watch this.
This is my partner, Addie Hernandez. She's a black belt in key fighting concepts. She also holds other black belts in subsystems of
One of the
key
key
fighting
things I
concepts.
always missed
She's
here
my
was I
business
didn't get to
partner and
actually
my
meet
training
these
partner.
two. My
I do a
instructor
lot of
and my
demonstrating
colleagues,
with
my training
Addie on
partners,
my
actually
videos.
did get to meet
She's
them.
the
They
one
went to
who
the
moves
gathering
the
of the
cleanest
Eagles.
and
I
knows
did
the
get to meet
best
Al
for
Tracy in
demonstrative
Ireland
purposes.
years ago as
We do
well.
it to give
And that
you
was
the
an interesting
cleanest
experience.
technical
I mean,
approach
obviously
to what
he
it is we're
wasn't
trying to
able
do.
to move. He was a much older man at
However,
that
because
point.
of the size
But the
and
knowledge
strength
that he had
weight
and the skill that he had
difference
in terms
between
of
us,
teaching that knowledge
I
and
bring in
telling
other
us about
people
the things
to
that
show some of
the
the
way
good
they were
function.
back when he was doing them,
Okay,
it
having
was a
said
really
that,
interesting
let's
time.
begin
But
with
I was very
Hubud.
sorry that I never got to
Facing
meet
each
Joe
other in a neutral
Simonet
position
in
of bring your
person at that
sides to
stage
side.
either.
This isn't a lower art stability training method. It's a neutral position and a mobile training method. Addie will give me a right chop, not dissimilar to a chop you're going to use in your Kenpo techniques. Comes into here, her target is perhaps
This
my
would be very similar
collarbone,
to
my
Sword of
neck,
Destruction.
my
So it will be
temple,
your inward
wherever
hand
she
sword.
wants to attack. When she gives me a chop, I counter that chop. I've now met her arm with my arm. This is the beginning of it. She gives me a chop, I give her a chop. I'm going to show you how I would teach it in a private lesson. That's how we're going to teach you today on film. So you'll have a clear understanding of how to express it, perhaps some of you are instructors, to your students. From a neutral position, this is kind of the caveman approach to beginning of Hubud. She chops me, I catch her chop. I chop her, she catches mine. So this is a beginning, it's a toughening drill. Hubud will toughen up your arms.
So one of the things here is as well, we said it's like Sword of Destruction from Parker Kenpo, which is the third yellow belt technique. It has the inward hand sword, obviously, which is the technique that they're executing here as the strike. And then they have half a wedge, so kind of like thrusting wedge as a Kenpo technique as well, or at least the Parker Kenpo technique. So it's kind of using that wedge principle as well. One of the things here is as well is that this is like the angle one. So if you've watched my videos recently or seen any of the kind of general Eskrima numeratas or targeting templates, an angle one is typically a forehand diagonal slash. If you're right dominant in this case, it would be from your right side to your left hip, basically, is the line it would travel. And that's essentially what they're doing here as well. So, there's a commonality in theme here, Hubud being essentially a Filipino martial arts drill. Again, the downward diagonal or the forehand diagonal slash here, or chop in this case, fits perfectly with their angle one. It's typically the first angle in most Filipino martial arts systems as well.
That isn't what it's for necessarily. What it's for is to listen to your opponent's intent. So after you've done this a few times, we're going to go to the next motion. From here, I'm coming up underneath her arm as if somebody's handing me a key, an idea, in my palm. Coming up to here, and I'm saying, hi. But instead of saying hi to her face, I'm going to come across, gathering information as I drag across her arm here. Then I'm going to do what we call a trap. Hubud is, after all, trapping range. Slapping down as I load from my own
And that
chop,
always makes me cringe.
extend, and she catches.
But she gets them back in about 2 seconds.
Clears, follows, traps, and chops me. It's a give and take. She does it, and then I do it. At this point, we are connected. When I go to hit her, she can feel it immediately.
So this is where it would be like your chi sao, for example.
Automatic.
You're connected.
Right now. There's no delay.
There's a sensitivity
We
to
are
each of the
listening to
moves,
each
and you
other's
feel what the
intent.
person is going to do if you're
Create
connected
a
enough.
reference point not dissimilar to the Tracy's Kenpo or any of the American Kenpo, any of the Kenpo systems. We teach a self-defense technique and use that as a reference point, as I've been stating. Once you're in a real-life situation, that base technique is going to change, and you're going to have to adapt and flow. That's what this is all about. So in Hubud, we catch, clear, trap, and hit, and she just caught on the other side. That, like the techniques, is our base reference point.
I really like the overhead look here as well. It just gives you a view that you don't usually get. Although the fisheye is very Beastie Boys.
Let's take a look at a different angle of Addie and I doing Hubud. Again, as if you're teaching it for the very first time. Addie gives me a chop. I counter her chop and block. I give her a chop. Same thing. This is the mirror image. This is how you want to teach it to a beginner.
So one of the big differences here is the blade of the hand. As you can see, it's kind of this way or this way if we go alongside it, where it's kind of turned in. One of the things that we learned when we were learning Hubud from Filipino martial arts was we would actually poke towards the eye. So again, much like that thrusting wedge in the Kenpo system, or at least Parker Kenpo system as it's known, thrusting wedge, we would typically wedge towards the eye, and it just gave this direct line back to the person as well. So that was something that we had in addition. Made it slightly more aggressive, I guess, and put a bit more pressure back on the person who was throwing the shot. But I mean, again, the concept here is that you're stopping the shot, only to move it and pass it, like we've already seen as well. But it was always something that was really interesting, was just that idea of if you start poking towards someone's eye with that wedge, suddenly you do feel a little bit more forward here.
I want to make a note. As Addie chops me, I want her to have a target in mind, preferably the collarbone or the neck. That keeps your elbow nice and low, and we'll talk about that perhaps a little later. She's also snapping her wrist here. So you've got the extension of the arm, the full rotation of the gross motor movement of the arm, and then just like our other techniques, the smaller motion to add more torque. Where you have body torque, you have power. To counter that, when it's slow motion, as Addie chops me, I don't just create a shield out here or a blockage or blockade. What I'm doing, when she chops me and it rotates and pops here, what I'm going to do is pop out. So what I'm doing is I'm meeting her extra force with my extra force.
So now you've got an outward hand sword basically meeting an inward hand sword.
I did, which is kind of goofy. Okay, she loads, not dissimilar to your other Kenpo techniques. Then I come up, clear. I'm doing this to monitor that elbow. If she chops me and I come right into here, she may step in and give me an elbow right here, and I just ate it. So what I'm doing, I'm listening to my opponent's intent or my partner's intent. As she chops me, I'm coming up just past the wrist, halfway between her wrist and elbow. And then when I turn it over and pass it across the center line, I'm now monitoring her intent. Then I trap. Once my hand leaves this elbow, I need to fill that in to also control it. Then I chop. She clears, traps, and hits. As I stated, this is like our technique It's our base reference point.
And even with that elbow check, this is where you start to see a lot of different things coming in. Like, if you're able to monitor that elbow, if you're able to exploit that elbow, if you're the person who isn't being checked in the correct way as well, this is where the drill can really become useful. Now, the one thing we have to be careful of there is obviously if you start moving faster than the other person, or, tip-tapping with them to go, oh, look, I got you, and so on, kind of defeats the purpose of the drill. So again, there's an honesty here, there's a back and forth trade. You'll notice neither of them is going faster than the other. They move at a relative pace, a relative speed, and a relative force. And that's also important when you're doing these types of drills. It's not about beating the other person per se. I mean, there's an element where you want to beat them by trapping them or taking away their ability to do the next move eventually as you start trying to generate your shapes or techniques out of it. But ultimately, if you're doing the flow drill as the flow drill, you probably shouldn't be moving much faster than the person that you're doing it, or, cheating, let's say. And there you can see where they start speeding up and they start slowing down and really kind of playing with pacing as well.
We want to keep our shoulders square. If we start going side to side and kind of turning our shoulders here, Addy can counter me very easily, just like that.
This is where you start playing with the depth of action, or lack of action, or lack of depth in this case.
We're going to keep our shoulders square and not cross our center line with our shoulders. She gives me a chop. I clear, trap, hit. I call it clear, trap, hit. The hit is really a chop, but you understand. Clear, chop, hit. We can also get mobile with this. This is our base drill. Hubud, to tie and untie. If I go to hit her, she can feel it. I go to grab her nose, she can feel it. She comes at me, I can do things from there. We're going to do more of those options off of this in a few moments. This is our base motion of Hubud. You could actually get down. You can go very quick. I can close my eyes and do this. We'll demonstrate this perhaps later. I'll do some movement blindfolded. Hubud. We can start moving around. Here. It's very quick. One of the points I'd like to make is when I'm standing here, if you look at my neutral position on this white cross on our platform, I have a weak point here and a weak point directly behind me. To my left and my right, I have stability. Also using the same cross, Addy can take her index finger and gently push me. I have a weak point behind me. If she pulls me, I have a weak point in front of me. Therefore, you might ask, well, why do I want a weak lower arc, or from the waist down? The reason I'm doing that is if she steps in with a foot forward and chops, she has a stronger base. And if I did this, like a karate type of stance, perhaps we have stronger bases. What that can do in training is it can actually weaken our upper arc and or our hubud, because we're using the lower arc with a stable base to compensate perhaps for a weak upper arc. Not for training, we don't want to do that. Addy gives me a hard chop here and pushes. Well, I have the weak point, so I'm going to fall off of that. You say, well, why not the strong base? Because I'm developing upper body sensitivity and or the ability to listen to my opponent's intent to its utmost, because it's a training drill. As she chops me here, if I'm in a weak base, we just showed how she can push me over, but she gives me a lot of pressure, I just clear it with my hands, thus making my upper arc much more efficient. We're extracting sensitivity from this.
And that's one of the key things that I always kind of jump in, and when I've watched this back again, that stood out to me. So obviously I've done a couple of videos recently on me doing the isolation drills or sets from Kenpo, particularly I think the most recent ones I did was striking set 1 and finger set 1, and oftentimes it's, the usual commenters out there, of, oh, you'll get your ass kicked standing that wide and standing like that doing these things. But again, it's a set, it's an exercise in isolation. And it kind of mirrors what's being said here as well, which is, in what's being said here, you're working on your upper art, as Simonet will call it here as well, which is if you take away the legs, you've got to develop your arms. You've got to develop the strength and sensitivity in the top half of your body, because again, our legs can add more force. We add backup mass, we add marriage of gravity, all of those wonderful principles that add to it. What our drills do, or our sets do in this case, striking set and finger set, they will teach you things like torque and monitoring your center line. Lots of different principles like that you wouldn't necessarily target if you were moving, because your body is starting to cheat a little bit by using more of your mass and everything else that comes with it. So this is something that stood out to me on this the other day as I was watching this again, is that's exactly what our sets do. So when you have a partner throwing for blocking set, for example, blocking set 1, if they're throwing the strikes at you and you're sitting in a horse stance, or training horse as it's known, you're getting hit, you're getting hammered on with your blocks, and suddenly you learn that your blocks have to be much better because you don't have the reliability of your legs behind you, or the additional body movement to give you distance or backup mass or any of that type of stuff that comes with it. So that was an interesting point that stood out to me, and just again wanted to call it out. So likewise, I have videos on this as well, obviously on the sets and so on, but that's something I'd be looking out for in future if I was doing the sets, things that they teach, things that they do, that we tend to miss because we think it's just another thing for a grade.
You'll see in a little while on this tape how the Kenpo techniques, Hubud lends itself very well to the Kenpo. They work very well together. In Kenpo, as in all martial arts systems, you have generally 4 ranges of unarmed combat. You have kicking and punching and trapping and grappling. Hubud is the trapping range. Within each range, there's sub-ranges. We're at the outside line of trapping. Addie gives me a chop, I'm out here, I'm trapping. She gives me a punch, I'm still trapping, but I'm a lot closer. This would be an in close trapping range. So we're at the outside range of trapping range. Let me explain a little bit what happens when people do Hubud. There's many different variations of it. I've developed Hubud, the style that I teach, or the approach I take, since the early 80s. There's many common flaws. One, which I've already talked about, is people do not get the snap or the rotation. When Addie chops me, she's snapping the wrist right at the end. She comes in and snaps. That's what I'm looking for, just like that. Snap. As well, which I've already said, I'm snapping her. When we did tackle techniques earlier in our tape, we talked about me stepping back, drawing some distance when Lloyd was attacking me around for a low tackle. My left hand snapped. My right hand loaded here. These are the same motions as in the loading for the Hubud. So a flaw would be not to load, which we talked about. Also, what people don't understand sometimes is that this chop, you really are practicing a chop. For instance, a Kenpo technique called the whip, where you step in, lock, hit. Here, look at my right hand. We would come in for the chop. That's the same chop as Hubud. When I do tackle technique, it's the same chop. On a tackle technique, it's the universal motion of that, what I call angle 1 chop.
So again, these are like a couple of examples of techniques, and again, the Tracy naming convention comes in here, which is different, but obviously he demonstrated what looks like fatal deviation, which is a brown belt. We have our inward block from a fake to an outward extended with our check, followed in by that chop again. Not uncommon. We've done that in various different ways right from the start. And then likewise, you've got things like charging ram, for example, where similar to Five Swords, it's got that downward chop into a circling inward downward chop as well. Same concept. It's almost like, to use the term, it's a master key movement or something like that. But again, similar movements, similarities in how you do it. If you do one thing well, you can apply it in multiple places, and that's the whole thing here as well.
What happens is people just sort of float their hand up here and just kind of, just for the sensitivity. But what we're trying to extract is the full range of motion as if there's intent. Another flaw in Hubud that's often presented is when Addie chops me, I'm catching it in here with a bent arm. This is a very weak position here. What I do is extend it out. Let me demonstrate on Addie how strong this angle is. We also do some punching from this in some of our other arts, having this sort of angle from shoulder to elbow to fist. It's the same motion as when I'm catching for hubud. If Addie would catch me right there, I'm outweigh Addie by about 100 pounds, and I have a pretty reasonable body strength. I'm going to try and bend her arm. That's how strong that angle is. My point is, keep that angle, and this is why. When she chops me, I'm always hitting at that angle. Once she's made contact, I can allow that angle to flex and or weaken. But the reason I can let it weaken is I want to get her closer to me. If I have it out here, she's farther away. As she gives me more pressure, I can let her come in. It allows me to do other stuff because she's closer to me. In hubad and or my approach, in is safe. We want to get as close as we can.
So again, this is where you have the concept of like how to beat action is meet the action. You're meeting the action with the initial shot to kind of stem it and push the person back slightly. But as he's demoed here as well, then you're also yielding, so you're borrowing force in some ways, if you want to use the Kenpo terminology here. So again, he's letting it collapse in with the idea that under control, he'll be able to now take it from there. So again, there's a level of playing with the Kenpo principles that we already have, but again, doing it in a more active way. If the person is not giving that amount of force or that forward pressure, then obviously you're going to have to do something different. But in this case, you'll see where you will notice when you're doing things like hubud and stuff like that, that, you know, the more forward pressure that a person gives you, the more chance you have to actually steal that from them and use it to your advantage. You know, smother them, choke them, pull them into whatever it may be at that stage as well. But again, another useful technique and tactic that can be pulled from hubud in general.
When she chops me, she has all the impact potential coming at me, right here. Once contact's been made, I've established this powerful angle, countered her. Now, her impact potential's gone. Now it's a connected push. Push as hard as you want. It's like, it's not that big of a deal. So I can allow myself to weaken. Another common flaw is people chop and they don't really have a target. To make it real, see your opponent's collarbone, see their neck, see their temple. Don't get lost in the flow and just drift through the drill. Sometimes people get lost in drills, and that's one of the problems with them. But if you keep it real by focusing on your intent on a target, it'll work for you much, much better.
And that's definitely one of the things that I agree with. You know, guilty of it myself at different times was, you know, you learn the drill, you learn how cool it looks, and you feel awesome doing it. Be that with like 2 sticks in hand or, you know, empty hand against someone just doing hubud or any variation drill and so on. Same with lock flows, even as we mentioned earlier on. It's all great and it's all cool, but you can get lost in that drill very quickly. It's like Kenpo, for example. You know, you do any technique to a level, your hands will fly everywhere, you'll look cool, you'll feel great, there'll be lots of slapping, lots of noise, and at the end of the day, you'll walk away thinking you were brilliant and badass. But, you know, what happens when that goes wrong? What happens when someone's not standing where they should be? What happens if someone covers instead of, like, you know, letting you hit them in the neck or whatever it might be? Any number of different things. If you're not prepared to deal with that variation and you're just waiting on the drill, it will fall apart. If you're expecting it to go exactly as planned, it will fall apart. And that is the big problem with a lot of flow drills at that point. So again, while it's being shown here, while it's being taught here, it's also being called out of don't get caught up in the drill. Otherwise, what's the difference than anything else? It'll fall apart the second something doesn't go according to plan. Whereas if you're training to find those moments where something isn't going to go according to plan, too much pressure in, you've given your hand too far away, whatever it might be from the hubud drill at this point, that's what you're looking for here as much as anything else. The drill can be learned, as you saw, in 3 moves. It's not that complicated as a drill. Where the real technical skill set comes from this is, or the ability comes from this is, by actually feeling where the drill is working to your advantage or working against you in some ways as well. And that's a big part of it. So it's not getting caught in that and not getting lost in that.
So Maddie's going to chop me towards my collarbone. From this position, because that's where her target is, it's all relevant to height, etc. But where her elbow is, I want her to push down really hard from here. Go ahead, push, 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 push. It's a very strong angle. If she were to chop higher like this, floating and unfocused with little or no intent strike, push down hard. And she can do that to me. Once I chop and my elbow's up high, I'm very easily toppable. These are the things
Nice
that you
little
learn
foot
in
sector
terms
and
of
foot trap in there as well.
relationship to leverage in anatomy, distance, etc. That'll bring out more life in your Kenpo. So Mr. Tracy, my Kenpo instructor, has always encouraged me to go out and train other arts to help enhance the Kenpo, and that's what I've done. She gives me a chop, her elbow's down. Another flaw is people let go of that trapping hand. I'm not trying to hold her, I'm just monitoring her. She punches me with something, I'm just listening and paying attention. Once I let go of this, I'm in danger. I can't effectively stop her or stop me from this position because there's not enough time, because there's not enough distance. So once my hand is here, my hand, my palm, the sensitivity as it were, is listening to her intent. As soon as there's pressure, this is like a receiver. Wrap your fingers around here. What that's doing is telling me everything she's going to do. If I lift my fingers up, she can grab my fingers and do nasty things to me, which we're going to show in our lock flow in a moment.
And this again is pointing out where one of the many problems we have in Kenpo usually is people aren't aware what their actual checking hand should be doing. Sure, it looks great and it's here and it's there and it's everywhere that it needs to be, but oftentimes we're not actually actively engaged or the hand isn't live. And that's the concept that also we've pulled a lot from our Filipino martial arts training as well, is you have a weapon in one hand, which is essentially a dead hand because it can only use the weapon in the way that the weapon can be used. Your live hand is the thing that's grabbing, trapping, checking, moving, accessing a secondary weapon, whatever it might be. That's the part that plays in. And that's what Kenpo has in spades when we do it right. We have that second hand, we have that checking hand, we've got our positional checks, we've got all of these pin-in checks and different things that we can do. But oftentimes people get lazy and you end up with, Napoleon, T-Rex, whatever it is, your hand is too close to you, it's not where it should be, and it's not actively involved in the fight, as it were, at this point. So this is a key thing here again, it's knowing what that other hand is doing when it's not engaged in a more aggressive way. It is checking, it is doing things, it is feeding to the next move, or shutting down a move in the next case as well. And that is one of the biggest problems we do have, and that I note in Kenpo, is people just don't pay attention to that second hand. It's what my instructor would call one-handed Kenpo, as opposed to two-handed Kenpo, where you should be using both sides of your body equally, in different ways, but, they should both be engaged in the whole thing, not just, waiting around for the next thing to happen or the next point where the hand needs to swap and be used as a strike or whatever it might be as well.
So when she chops me, elbow, intent, target, snapping, rotation, angle, trapping, and not letting go of her, but instead listening, keeping my hand relaxed. The slap is to draw attention. Listen to her slap when she does it to me. There's it. It's a slapping motion. Whoa, you're going to do that in real life. This is a drill, not a technique. Kenpo, of course, is full of techniques. You want to find drills that work with the techniques, and techniques you can put into drills. Now you've got the best of both worlds. You've got some synergy going on. A technique relationship to Huba is the initial attack. It's not a drill now, but the technique. She goes ahead and chops me, smash! I'm just going to hit her. That's more of a technique aspect. Then we can do whatever we want from there. and move and go and free flow. But the drill is completely different.
It's a great demo of just like how the speed can be upped or changed or slowed down or whatever it might be from there. There are also some variations that can be built in to change out the pattern every so often. Once you have someone in there, you can break the pattern as well. No, I think before we go any further for this evening, obviously I just wanted to make sure that I covered a bit of the video. I just wanted to try something a little bit new, as I said already. So this is my attempt at just kind of play-by-play commentary, color commentary, whatever you want to call it, or adding my own insights to things, or what I've gotten from this person and from their shared knowledge, as it were, at the time. Obviously, very sad that Joe Simonet passed away a few years ago. Was definitely someone who was influential, certainly to my career, my thought processes as well in terms of skills. So may you rest in peace for that one as well. But definitely there's a legacy of information there. There's more materials. He's got like a slew of materials and videos all over YouTube, for us all to absorb and take in. My stance here is not to show his material in any way, making it my own, but more so just kind of saying, hey, this is some stuff you can look at. This is ways that it might influence your Kenpo and so on, or make you think differently about what you do as well. That's all any of us are really aiming to do at this point. I mean, there's a whole system there in Kenpo. It's obviously can be locked as this kind of museum piece. It can be put in a glass case and, kept exactly as is. But, everyone quotes Mr. Parker and Ed Parker, or whatever you want to call him. Everyone quotes him as saying, like, the art shouldn't go stale. You should tailor it. You should, continue to evolve it and so on. There are a lot of people out there trying to keep it a certain way, which is great. Protect it as is, keep it as is. But there's a lot of material out there. And with the internet the way it is, with the amount of information that's out there, people like myself sharing, people like Joe Simonet sharing long before we even got down that road, makes a big difference. So keep looking out. Keep looking for ways to improve your stuff. If you like this, let me know. If you stayed with me, thank you. This was an experiment really for me as much as anything else. I'm planning on hopefully doing this live. So if you think you'd like to do this live where you can actually chat with me as we go along and maybe have a larger conversation, let me know. But I wanted to do at least one recording just to see how it would work as a format and everything else before I start, going out there live and seeing how it goes. But if you are enjoying this or you haven't subscribed, please do, because I intend to do more of these types of things as well as my own material, which I've been putting up quite a bit of recently as well. But if there's things that you want, things that you need, ask away. I'm happy to share as well. But there you go. That's what we've got for tonight. So thank you, everybody.